Faces up after gathering the basketball. Shot clock under 5. Trent Jr. is going to have to drive on Mihailuk. Tough contested shot and got it to go.
4 passes.
Oh, and Mihailuk tried to get inside and snapped that pass back to the outside, but it was intercepted. And Trent, who's had an excellent season shooting the basketball, does so there. And you see the flare out there by Trent Jr. again, who's got another 3.
And making that extra pass.
And on the drive, the active hands force the turnover. Trent Jr. this time wants to drive on Roby, floats it up and in.
It's the same possession, just a second chance.
Trent Jr. finally cools off from 3. It's the second miss for Toronto. Keeps it alive here for Mihailuk, who ran into Siakam and decided he wanted to pull it back out. As Williams cuts his way to the rim, and we get a trip and a foul. And so here is Josh Hall getting an opportunity to bring it up the floor. Took it across the timeline to initiate the offense, and that pass by Maledon intercepted. Took it across the timeline to initiate the offense, and that pass by Maledon intercepted. And it's Trent Jr. again, who continues to torment OKC. Doesn't matter what jersey he's got on.
At forcing turnovers, that's over 16 a game. And as you just mentioned, don't foul them because they get there about 25 times.
Throughout the course of the season when he's got minutes. Mismatch here with Bradley. Trent Jr. takes it himself with the 3 and is off. As you're feeling, it's got to be decisiveness to time it up right.
Absolutely, yeah. If you take too much time, it just goes away. As that guy right there, Trent Jr. doesn't need a whole lot of time. He's already done a move like that on the right side where he just evades the defense.
And is that going to be a goaltend? It is on Moses Brown. Jackson and Maledon out on the perimeter. Played a little 2-person game as Jackson once again lets it go, and that rebound right there, weak side to Trent Jr. Trent Jr. weaves his way into that jumper. He's been making the 3s, but misses the 2.
As the ball had a funny bounce, but not to Mr. Roby.
Boy, Gary Trent Jr. had 4 threes in 3 games coming into this one.
Heckle you a little bit. Well, like the fans used to do me when I played.
Going off of Paris, that is a point, as there is a contested 3 there. Gary Trent Jr. might have thought he got fouled. It's below the free throw line, but back outside. Trent Jr. run off the 3-point line, will drive. And we're going to get a held ball, and it's going to be Boucher and Roby tied up underneath.
You're always taking tests, no matter what you're doing. Never a final exam. He's one of those guys who's really done a good job of passing those tests.
Well, Jackson started the offense there off the dribble, drove in, kicked it out to Mihailuk, and then got it right for Toronto, as he's still got 23 points.
A lot of these guys are learning how to play in these types of situations where you're playing against a really good defensive team in Toronto. And you have to score the basketball.
Well, Trent's got to put it up after the turnover, and the bounce pops in. As Maledon dribbled it off of his foot, and the carom went into the body.
Where you're playing against a really good defensive team in Toronto, and you have to score the basketball.
Well, Trent's got to put it up after the turnover, and the bounce pops in. As Maledon dribbled it off of his foot, and the carom went into the body. 2 players providing a big punch off the bench have combined for 23 points. As Hall trying to defend Trent Jr. Hand in the face, still not enough. So approaching that total, or that average. Trent Jr. again wide left, and it looked like that one banged off the tape there.
Whether he's above or below that 3-point line.
Maledon lost the handle on a turnover. Anunoby gets out ahead of everybody with the slam. Still vying for a possible spot on the postseason, 11th in the Eastern Conference. Trent Jr. trying to shed Williams. The scoop shot, no. You've got to be able to challenge that.
Yeah.
It's just too important.
Right.
But you can't challenge it unless it's called a goaltend to begin with.
Right.
That is just...
Time ticking away. Shot clock down. OG, tremendous defense. And how about that? A couple of sequences where the Raptors are able to get...
As you just mentioned, 12 rebounds.
Williams trying to stay attached to Trent Jr., who's looking for quick offense. No on the first effort, and it pops out to Mihailuk.
And that's the stop you needed right there.
Still double team. Dribble is out of it. Keeps his dribble alive. Shot clock under 10. Siakam's going to kick it, which is going to give the Thunder an extra 7 seconds.